We are about to begin another episode of the Prosperident webinar series. From their unique perspective as dentistry's embezzlement experts, Prosperident's team brings you information you will not find anywhere else. Now sit back and relax while Prosperident's Amber Weber, Wendy Askins, and David Harris address the issues that are important to you.
Hello and welcome everyone. We're so glad that you can join us. Just like our song just talked about, here comes that sinking feeling. What we're going to talk about today is picking up the pieces and what to do when the unthinkable happens, when you become a victim of embezzlement and fraud happening in your office. So today's topic is going to be really interesting. We're going to share information and stories for those of you who maybe haven't experienced this yet, so that if that day ever comes, you are prepared to know how to prepare yourself. Before we get started, a couple things. The webinar lasts about an hour. We do take time at the end for questions and answers. So please, as the webinar goes on, please feel free to submit those questions in writing. If we do not answer them, it's because we want to reserve it for the end to personally answer that question. The session is also recorded. So if you are not able to stay for the entire session, or you have a colleague that you think would benefit from today's webinar, it will be available tomorrow. You will receive continuing education credit thanks to our friends at Altura Periodontics. You will receive that email for the continuing education link after today. And as always, please give us some good Google reviews when the presentation is over. We're so excited you guys will join us. Our special edition we want to give to all of those of you who have participated in our monthly webinars. Next month, we're having a special edition Prosperident webinar, You Ask and We Answer. It'll be September 16th, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Pacific. We will answer submitted questions from you, our audience. So even if you know people who couldn't make it today, please tell them about this. We want you to submit your questions via video or written to request@dentalembezzlement.com. There's a bonus for this. If we pick your written question, you get a signed copy of David's book. Here's the big bonus. If we use your video question in our webinar, you will get the book plus a 1-hour consultation with us, the three of us, our Prosperident team. So spread the word. We want everybody who has participated in tonight's webinar and previous webinars to be part of this exciting event that we're going to host next month. The deadline for questions is September 8th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
Thank you, Amber. Hi, Dave. It's good to see you. And it's good to see everyone else that's joined us today. I am so excited about this topic, having worked with so many clients and walked them through that moment in time when the unthinkable has happened to them and they find out that someone has been embezzling from them and they're just totally confused and they've got all of these thoughts whirling around in their head. What do I do? Where do we go? How's this going to affect my family and my business? Today, we're going to give some of those answers to you. We're going to walk you through what happens when you first become suspicious, what happens when you confirm your suspicion, and how you confront. So from suspicion to confrontation, we're going to walk you through all of those. We're also going to walk you through the avenues of restitution that are available both civilly and criminally. And we're also going to talk about how to manage your personal and your business reputation. Because after you become embezzled, that's also very important how you the messaging, that you control the message that goes out from that particular experience.
Well, just like the song said at the beginning, when you have that sinking feeling, you know, and you wake up in the middle of the night with a start, and suddenly it becomes clear that maybe that trusted staff member of yours isn't so trustworthy after all. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that when you have that feeling, statistically, you're right about 70% of the time. Trust your instincts. When I get talking to doctors who call me and have that suspicion, one of the first questions I ask them is this. Let's say hypothetically this person is not stealing. How do you feel about them otherwise as an employee? In other words, would they keep their job or not if embezzlement wasn't happening? And sometimes dentists will say to me, you know what, they're far from my best employee anyway, so I think if they're not stealing, they probably don't have a job here. And then one of the things that I say to them very quickly is, well, okay, so if they lose their job if they're stealing and they lose their job if they're not stealing, this might be a time to look at firing them. In other words, why wait until the end of our investigation to let that person go? We talked about termination in an earlier webinar, and just a reminder that all of our previous webinars are available on our website. There was one that we did called Breaking Up is Hard to Do, and we talked there about the ins and outs of firing. So sometimes having evidence of embezzlement is helpful in getting through the termination process without, for example, getting sued. And if that's the case, then firing now may not make sense. But if you have an employee who is fireable now and you're not happy with them and you also think they're stealing, well, let's just do what's going to happen anyway and get them out the door. The next thing I'm going to say is this. If you have suspicions about somebody, it's really vital that you not let that person know that you have concerns. And if you were watching our pre-show, one of the things you may have seen was a case where there was a murder. And this happened in Anne Arundel County, so just outside Baltimore, Maryland, and somebody named Shante Joyner Hickman ended up murdering her doctor because Shante thought that the doctor was going to catch her stealing. And I mean, this is a terribly tragic story. And what makes it even worse than it would be otherwise is that the amount that she had stolen was $17,000. If somebody's going to go to jail, you know, the list of things they would not do to prevent that from happening is pretty short. Now, thieves don't always think things through. If somebody's embezzling from you and your practice burns down, they're going to be the #1 suspect. I mean, they will get caught and punished, but that isn't necessarily consistent with how they think. Here are some of the things that doctors do when they suspect embezzlement to get them caught or get them uncovered. The first one is you go to your receptionist or your office manager and you ask for a whole bunch of reports you've never asked for before. And then the next thing you do with those reports is you take them into your private office, you close the door, you phone your CPA, and you spend an hour on the phone with your CPA. If I am a thief and I'm stealing from you, every morning when you come into the practice, I look at you and I ask myself the question, does she know that I'm stealing? And anything like the kind of actions I'm talking about here will cement in my mind that you are. Of course, one of the cardinal sins here is to bring on-site investigators. One thing, if you've been watching our webinars, that you know about us is that we do everything we can to avoid setting foot in your practice. And almost everything that we do is done at a distance, and the internet is very much our friend in that. But on-site investigators, you know, it's very hard to stick a geeky accountant-looking person in your practice for 4 days and claim that they're there to fix your compressor. So we don't want to do that. And we're going to talk a little bit later about confronting the suspect. Certainly when you have suspicions or even discovery of embezzlement, it's way too early to confront a suspect at that point. You need to know a lot more than you do at that juncture. And all you're likely to do if you're in the 70% who are right is tip your hand prematurely. And if you're in the 30% where they get suspicious and it's not true, then you're going to ruin a relationship with an employee. So there is a time for confrontation, but it's not early on. And we all know that dentists love to fix things quickly. This is a case where you really need to be a little bit patient.
So if you do catch someone red-handed, just like you were talking, Dave, you can't let your emotions get in the middle of it. So this slide kind of talks about a childhood story that we're all familiar with, Pinocchio. Pinocchio has celebrated its 80th anniversary this year. And going back to the thoughts of Pinocchio, this is where, as a practice owner, you can really get your lesson on honesty. So in the story of Pinocchio, every time the situation rose, the story always changed. But when you catch someone red-handed, this is when you have to have your ducks in a row and have everything ready to prepare for the termination. So the main thing is, do not be angry and have everything lined out, and don't let the suspect be involved emotionally in the conversation that you're going to have with them. At Prosperident, we have a termination checklist. Even if you don't have our termination checklist, make sure you have everything in writing. And like I said, the business side of your conversation is not going to change. Make sure all of your communications, when you catch this person red-handed in that Pinocchio situation, remains very business-like, very structured, because this person's going to play into your emotions because you've developed that relationship with them. So don't play into being Pinocchio for them. Exit interview, make sure everything is scripted and your objections are clear. If you do receive a confession, you want to make sure that it's very clear and concise and it ends in a business-like manner. And then the main thing is you want to make sure at the end you're going to proceed with an investigation. We're going to talk about that more later and the importance of an investigation, but there's several reasons that you need to make sure this person knows that they're not going to get away with just their nose growing.
So let's talk about our relationship with law authorities. You know, when something like this happens, it's best not to confront or not to ask social media warriors what the best thing is to do. So, you know, I love social media, but Dave's going to put up an example of, this was actually on a dental Facebook page, a dental Facebook page, in which Dave and I were actually both involved in trying to educate the people that were on there, because someone, number one, had posted, I think someone from my office is stealing. And this is one of the ridiculous comments that someone wrote. I mean, not only is the grammar atrocious, but there's falsity in every single line or every single concept that person wrote. Now, I'm sure they weren't trying to spread, you know, bad juju or whatever. They just didn't have the knowledge or the experience to be able to give an educated comment on how to handle the police.
There's just so much wrong with that statement.
I'm sorry, but you just gotta laugh at it. It's wow. Anyway, okay, let's go on, Dave. First of all, the police are not just standing there waiting at the door for you to come in. This is not an easy crime to uncover. It's very technical, because remember, we're dealing with dental accounting and we're also dealing with your practice management software. Now, if you live in a large city and you have a financial crimes unit within your police department, that may be something a little bit different than in a very rural area. But it's a very complex crime. Dave, you want to go to the next one? There we go. One of the things that I have always found in working with my clients is that once my clients go to the police with the report that we've written for them, I always try to contact the detective that's working on that case to go through all of my case files and help them to understand exactly what happened. Case in point, that sometimes the police are hesitant to begin the initial investigation, but if you have all of the information to give to them up front, then they'll be more than willing to take that on and process it as a secondary investigation, because all they have to do is go back and double check and make sure that the work is correct that we've done. Case in point with that, we had a case in New Mexico where she was a young detective, and she had been a beat cop who was on the street investigating family violence or domestic violence calls. She was doing domestic violence one day. The next day, she was a detective investigating financial crimes. And I love this woman because she just called and spent hours on the phone with Dave, hours on the phone with myself, and she was just flat out honest. And she said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm willing to help prosecute this case or send it to the DA, but you guys are going to have to help me write the charging papers. The charging papers that you take before a judge so that you can get an arrest warrant for the suspect. So we helped her along with that. I mean, on a side note, it was very unfortunate for everyone involved, because that suspect ended up committing suicide the morning before the police showed up to arrest her that afternoon. Just not to go down a trail, but again, just to emphasize how serious embezzlement is and the serious consequences that come along with it. The police, when you go to the police, they're going to want you to bring a packet with you basically that says, this is what was stolen, this is how it's done, here's every transaction that was manipulated, and then they'll be willing to take that on and work with you. And another issue we also deal with is when we talk about police officers not really understanding dentistry, or some of them don't even really understand the crime of theft and how it's committed. Another issue is that sometimes the DA, the prosecuting attorney, doesn't understand it either. In some cases, you can take the report that Prosperident has written, or if you've written a report yourself, you can take that and you can go straight to the DA and you can bypass the police. So that might be an easier way to get around it if you have the correct information.
Yeah, and that can take years off the amount of time that it takes to bring somebody to justice as well. Whether you can go directly to the district attorney or you need to work through the police really depends on how complete the information is, you know, how much evidence you've been able to gather. And certainly if you're in that situation, that's something we can help advise you on. Well, let's talk about confessions. And confessions are wonderful. If a thief is going to spill their guts to you, it has tremendous value. First of all, that guarantees that there's going to be a criminal conviction. You know, there are some kinds of stealing that are hard to prosecute, and one of the ones that is the prosecutor's nightmare is payroll fraud. So picture a scenario where you have delegated payroll to somebody in your practice, and that person has used their authority with the payroll company to overpay themselves. To make a payroll conviction stick, you need one of three things. You either need really clear documentation on how much that person was supposed to be paid. So something like an employment contract, which, let's face it, a lot of you don't have for most of your employees. Or you need some kind of deception from that person, you know, where they've actively concealed from you what they're paying themselves because people wouldn't do that if what they were paid was legitimate, or you need a confession. So confessions have a lot of value in the criminal conviction. Also, a lot of times somebody's confession will help make the investigation go quicker, more smoothly, and possibly less expensive. Just before we went live, Amber and I were talking about one of her clients who's on the call tonight. In this particular case, the thief, suddenly feeling some remorse, I'll say, has offered to cooperate in the investigation. And Amber and I were sort of mapping out some areas where, Amber's plotting slowly and could use, the person who did it saying, "This is what I did." So it does help investigation. The one thing I'll say about confessions is that when people confess, they're not usually doing it from a feeling of guilt. They're trying to minimize consequences. So what they tell you is not what actually happened. They will tell you the minimum that they think you will believe. On average, when people confess, they confess to about 1/6 of what they've actually stolen. So if somebody confesses that they stole $40,000, the chances are really good that they took a heck of a lot more than that. But that's what they think you will believe. If that confrontation is happening with a thief and there's a possibility of a confession, there's a way to do it. And this has to be carefully set up. This is not something to do on the fly. The best question that you can ask a thief is, I'm not asking you if you did it. I know you did it. What I want to know is why you did it. And most thieves go into that meeting prepared to deny, deny, deny. And when you put it to them that way, that kind of shuts that argument down and kind of puts them back on their heels a little bit. And actually, I'm going to show you an interrogation video. This is actually, it's police interviewing a murder suspect in a minute. The video goes on for a couple of minutes, but these are skilled investigators, and you'll see them do this, and they get this guy to kind of start walking backward with his story. And at the end, he confesses. So you'll see them do it, and you'll see that question come out very clearly. If somebody's going to make a confession, there are a few elements. First of all, it could be in writing, it could be oral. If it's an oral confession, it should be recorded, and ideally video. If that's not possible for whatever reason, then audio is second best. The advantage of video is that it means that there's no question about whose voice it is. If we only have audio, one of the things you have to establish in court is that's the audio of the suspect. If it's recorded, the first thing that needs to be on the recording is, do you consent to me recording this? And the person who's confessing saying, yes, I do. That needs to be there. We also want, whether it's a written confession or a verbal one, we also want somebody to confirm that it's voluntary, that they haven't been coerced, that they're making this of their own free will. Then, of course, they need to talk about how they did it and when. And the other thing that we always look for in a confession is what's called moral justification. And that's where somebody explains why they thought it was okay to do this. And if it's a written confession, it needs to be signed. There needs to be a witness present who signs as a witness. It's totally fine for you to be the witness. There's nothing kind of preventing you from doing that. So I'm now going to play this little video, and it lasts a couple of minutes, but watch the questions the police ask here and how they get this guy to start backing out of his story.
Do you have any questions for me before?
Why am I under suspicion? Is it just my car, or is there anything else?
I mean, that's, a large portion. It is a very unique car. Like I said, our search warrant is just for the car.
Yeah.
So we can look into it. We can, of course, see what we can find. And, of course, you could also turn around and exonerate you completely. Talking about a very rare car.
We want to understand why you did it.
Yeah.
We don't understand why you stopped her to pick her up. Was it to give her a ride? Are you afraid to tell us that you gave her a ride? Maybe you wanted to make a couple bucks as an Uber driver, and she told you I had to go sign a lease at One North, and you're like, oh, I know where that's at. I'll drop you off. If you're afraid to tell us that you gave her a ride someplace, we can work with you there. But I know that you picked her up. I know you did. I saw you in your shirt, arms fully extended.
I did pick a girl up. I don't remember where.
Okay.
I saw her picture. I don't think it was her, though.
Do you remember the girl's name that you picked up?
No, she was talking very broken English.
Okay. Tell us about what happened. What time of day was that?
Early afternoon. I don't really remember.
Okay.
And I saw it was north, so I started driving north. And she said something like, turn left after a couple blocks. Maybe she said something else, because that's really when she started freaking out. And she wanted to get out of the car. Get out, tried pulling the door. It's locked because the car auto locks. I unlocked, she got out. That was it. If I recognized her, I would have told the agents that came on Monday or Tuesday, whenever it was, that it was her.
Okay.
Like, because I knew she was missing. I picked up an Asian girl. I thought she was about 20.
You know that I know that you didn't drop her off in that neighborhood. You know that we can follow her phone.
Okay.
So where did you drop her off at?
Where'd you take her, Brent? We need to find Yang Yang.
Tonight.
And then he confesses. And again, those were two pretty good investigators, and you heard that question come across clearly. I want to know why you did it. And the guy's story kind of slowly broke down.
Moving forward, you've got the confession from the thief, from the person who stole from you. So a lot of times, many doctors will want to settle. And the main thing with this is you want to have professional assistance. I have a personal story about this. I had a client that wanted to settle. And the more we got involved with this, I realized it was kind of like building a house on sand. Looking in, they thought it looked really solid. It was a great foundation. She admitted, let's settle, let's get this done and over with. But just like sand, with wind and weather, that foundation will change. So if you don't have that professional assistance and you're not going about it in a professional way, when you go down the route to settle, it can become not very stable. If you do decide to settle and the thief offers you money, you need to make sure that you don't offer anything in return, because you don't want your foundation for your future possibilities of getting insurance to become not stable. If you do not have professional assistance and you don't go about it the right way and have a good foundation for yourself, it will compromise your ability in the future to claim deficiency with the insurance that you have. In my story, this is what happened. The doctor agreed to settle with the suspect, and instead of keeping the wording clear and concise, they offered, we're done in this matter. So the end result is really compromised their ability to get reimbursed for a big portion of what had occurred in their practice. Moving on with the settle, you've got to think about extortion, Dave.
Oh, that's me. Maybe I'll just dwell on the insurance deficiency for 1 second, Amber, in case that's not clear to people. So let's say somebody steals $70,000 from you, and they come back to you and say, look, I'll give you $50,000 if you call us square. And you agree to do that. What you can't do then is go back to your employee dishonesty insurance and claim the other $20,000, because when you settled with that person, you extinguish the balance of the debt. So at that point, you have no loss, at least for insurance purposes. You certainly do for economic purposes, but you have, when you settle with somebody and you say, that's it, you know, the balance is extinguished, then you can't make the claim. But let's talk about extortion, because that's a trap that people fall into sometimes very quickly if they're trying to handle this themselves. The first thing I'll say about extortion, which is called blackmail in some states, is it's a felony. And punishments vary, but 15 years is not uncommon in states. We all understand the concept of extortion from the movies. You know, when the loan shark says to you, you know, unless you pay me back by 5 o'clock tomorrow, I'm going to break both your kneecaps. I mean, we all understand that that's extortion. The statement that's on the screen is also extortion. You know, if you pay me, I won't press charges. And what you're doing there is you're threatening somebody with criminal punishment unless they repay you. And the irony of extortion is when you threaten to do something that is perfectly legal in and of itself, it can become extortion. In other words, if somebody's stolen from you, you're quite free to report that to the police or take your case to the district attorney. What you're not free to do is to threaten to do those things unless somebody pays you. And that's extortion. And again, if people are handling this themselves, they just don't necessarily understand how to avoid this minefield. And it's very simple. It's illegal to use the threat of criminal action for monetary gain. So that's the trap. The settlement file that Amber was dealing with, thankfully she was able to keep them out of this one, but they did get a surprise when they thought that, you know, the amount they didn't get back from the thief they could claim on insurance. And Amber said, sorry, you can't.
Let's talk about criminal prosecution. So what I hear a lot of people say, even some of my clients, is, I want her thrown in jail. I want her arrested and thrown in jail, locked up for the rest of her or his life.
See, Amber, I knew she wouldn't say ass.
I thought about it, but
I just knew it.
Anyway, hey, Dave, you own the company, so it's okay for you to say ask, but it's not okay for me to say.
Oh, she said it. We got her.
I'm from Texas. I'm not easily offended. Anyway, now I lost my train of thought. Okay, anyway, so here's the deal. We've already kind of talked about it a little bit. It's really not your choice. Now, you can go to the authorities and you can present your case and you can file a police report. Where that report goes from there, you have no say over. It's the district attorney or the assistant district attorney that has a say on if the state or if the government chooses to prosecute that case. If the state or the government chooses to prosecute that case, you don't have to pay for an attorney. Now, I do have some clients that will hire an independent attorney in these cases just to look out for their own best interest and to follow the court case through the system. For example, in a plea bargain situation, they would need an attorney to help negotiate with the DA what they're willing to give up and what they're willing to get back. But the point is that you don't have to pay for prosecution as you would in a civil case. And then also, the punishment for the crime depends on the amount of the crime, the amount of the theft, and the state that you live in. So, for example, we have some statistics from California. So you can see there what the legal aspect is in California. Now, I happen to know in Virginia, I have and of course in Texas, I have clients, and the laws that govern that state are a bit different. And I have one case that was charged with 8 felony counts because the state of Virginia counts a certain amount of money per every 6 months. And if you reach that within a 6-month time period, they charge you with a felony, and then they move on. And if it continues on, the more felonies that you rack up. That's how she ended up with a 12-year jail sentence. So it depends on what state you're in as well.
Yeah, and the other thing that sometimes people don't think about with embezzlement is that it depends how somebody steals, but in a lot of cases, embezzlement also involves breaking federal law. And there are 2 federal laws that a lot of embezzlement catches, and they're called wire fraud and mail fraud. And wire fraud involves some kind of fraudulent action using electronic transmission. So an example would be if I submit to an insurance company a false insurance claim, that would be wire fraud. If I took the same claim and I printed it out and I mailed it to them in a paper format, that would likely be mail fraud. So a lot of embezzlement breaks federal law. And then the question really is, well, can we get somebody federally prosecuted? The thing I'll tell you is that the FBI and the other agency that prosecutes some amount of embezzlement is the United States Secret Service. It takes about $250,000 to get them out of bed. So if you are embezzled and it's a big dollar case, then by all means you can approach one of these agencies. Again, as Amber said earlier, they really don't have the ability to do primary investigation. They kind of need somebody else to do that for them. But once they have our report in their hand, they can run with it very nicely after that. A couple of things to know about federal prosecution. The first is that the range of penalties is much higher. So wire fraud and mail fraud both have maximum penalty of 20 years in prison plus a $250,000 fine. So, you know, when you compare that to what could happen, for example, in California, it's more than double. And a lot of people get this wrong. There's a provision in the United States Constitution that says that people will not be tried twice for the same crime. It's called the double jeopardy provision, which most of you have probably heard of. It's actually interpreted just slightly differently than that. The interpretation is that you cannot be tried twice for the same offense. So if you do something and it breaks state law and it also breaks federal law, you can be prosecuted for both. The double jeopardy provision doesn't prohibit that because they're different offenses. I mean, it's embezzlement or larceny at the state level, and it's wire fraud or mail fraud, or the other one that sometimes is trotted out by the feds is something called RICO. RICO is basically an anti-organized crime statute, but it does get used on embezzlement matters as well. It's the racketeering, influence, and corrupt organizations statute. So we do see that one occasionally. But if you are the victim of a significant embezzlement, one of the things that we want to discuss with you is, can we make this into a federal matter?
Once again, another one of my favorite topics. A lot of people don't realize that they do actually have insurance for employee theft. If, you know, I always like to give the example, if you were to have someone break into your physical office and, you know, steal your cone beam machine or whatever, you would file an insurance claim for that. Employee dishonesty is exactly the same. It's generally around $25,000. For example, I just spoke with a client last night, and bless his heart, I found about $60,000 in embezzled funds in about 2 hours of looking through the database. So I called him to give him the bad news, and I said, you know, get your insurance policy out. He said, oh no, we don't need to do that. I don't have insurance. And I said, do me a favor. Just do me a favor. Even if you don't believe I'm right, get your insurance policy out, call your agent, and look for it. Sure enough, he called me back this afternoon and he said, oh, you're right. We have $25,000 worth of coverage. Well, I know everyone watching is really smart because we're all in dentistry together, right? I found 60 just in a short time period. He has $25,000 worth of coverage, right? So there's a huge gap there. What I recommend doing is increasing the amount of your insurance policy. They usually are 25, 50, 75, or it can even go up to 100 or more. I recommend a minimum of 75, if not 100. 100's better, because when you find it, you're gonna need it, and it won't cost that much more to increase the maximum payout for that. Dave, can you go ahead and bring up to the end of that? Because I'd like to just kind of go off on a tangent for a moment and how the insurance companies work. If you're thinking that insurance coverage for employee dishonesty is like fighting the insurance company to get your dental claims covered or paid, yeah, you'd be exactly right. It's very difficult to go to bat and fight them. And that's why I love this, because we're good at it, or I'm good at it. I'll toot my own horn. I'm really good at it. First of all, it's kind of a catch-22, because your insurance company requires you, and it says in their paperwork, they require you to notify them as soon as you know theft has happened. So you call them and you notify them, and then they tell you, oh, you have 60 days to file the paperwork, or that claim's going to go inactive, right? So they try to make it sound like you have 60 days to get all your paperwork together. Some insurance companies that I've worked with, they send you a list that's 3 pages long of documents that they require from you to prove that theft has happened. Anyway, so they're going to give you 60 days to do this, right? And, you know, especially in dentistry, or I'll speak for orthodontists, or in orthodontics, you know, we have, let's say we have monthly payments of, you know, $150 to $200 in cash each month that's coming in. That's a whole lot of transactions to have, and a whole large database to have to go through. 60 days is a short amount of time to be able to do that. So I just want you to know that up front, but you can file for an extension, and they'll keep it open. They'll keep it inactive, but open for sometimes around 24 months. A lot of them will require that you file a police report, and that you, Dave, what's that word I can't ever think of? What's the word?
I might need a hint here.
Is it subjugate when the insurance company?
Subrogate, yeah.
Subrogate, yeah. I never can remember that word for some reason. Anyway, which means that they'll pay you, and then they'll go get their money, because you're handing it over to them to go and get their money from the suspect. One last thing I want to mention is that there are some insurance companies who will take the report and they'll take your documentation, and they will actually send it to an independent forensic accounting firm for the theft to be verified. And if that happens, it can take 6 to 8 months to get paid back, or to get that money back for them to pay out on the claim. So if you have any questions about insurance claims for employee dishonesty, I love it. It's a challenge. Send them to me, and I'll be able to help you out, or I'll be glad to give you some advice.
So insurance is the first place you get money back, and that's relatively speaking the low-hanging fruit. But as Wendy mentioned, most of you are probably sitting on a policy that covers $25,000, and the average theft that we see is over $100,000. So what about the rest of your money? Well, there are a few options here. The first one is this: if the thief was taking your checks and cashing them, then you can make a claim against the thief's bank. And you know, this isn't the way that theft happens in every case, but if it does, you're in a pretty good position, because it really doesn't matter how much or how little money the thief has. If their bank has an obligation to you, then the bank can certainly pay that. So you know, if it requires a specific pattern, but all things considered, this is not a bad place to be. After that, where do you go? Well, the first thing that a lot of clients ask us is, well, you know, should I sue the embezzler? And my answer usually is probably not, for a couple of reasons. First of all, these people generally are really good at spending money. And, you know, they spend it in places that don't produce enduring value. I mean, they go on expensive trips, they buy fancy clothes, they get cosmetic surgery done. I had one dentist where the staff member had gotten breast augmentation, and you know, he wanted to sue her, and I said to him, you know, I'm not absolutely sure what you're going to do with 2 slightly used bags of silicone. And he didn't really have a good answer for that. There are a couple of problems with suing. The first one is you can win but lose. So let's say somebody took $150,000 from you and you sued them. Well, it's probably going to cost you $20,000 to $25,000 in legal fees to sue. So now you've increased your loss to $175,000. You win, but the next thing the thief does 2 days later is declare bankruptcy. And when you declare bankruptcy, what really happens is that you end up more or less extinguishing your debts. And if you have no assets to begin with, bankruptcy is a really easy and painless thing to do. So now all you accomplished through that whole process was you took a $150,000 loss and you made it into a $175,000 loss, because your attorney is still going to want to be paid. And the other issue with lawsuits is there's a law called ERISA, which is the Employment Retirement Income Security Act. And what ERISA says is that retirement savings, and one of the most common types is a 401k, is exempt from seizure for a debt. In other words, you know, let's say you sue somebody and you win, and now you're looking for $175,000, and the only asset they have is $200,000 in their 401k. You can't touch it. In fact, they can declare bankruptcy and wipe out your debt and keep the 401k. So for all these reasons, in general, and there are exceptions, but in general, lawsuits probably aren't your best way to get money back. The better way is when somebody gets prosecuted criminally, and Wendy was talking about that a minute ago, is to ask, is to ask the judge to give you what's called a restitution order. So this becomes part of somebody's sentence, and it's very routine in embezzlement cases to get this, as long as you prod the district attorney to ask for it. So now this is part of somebody's sentence, and what the judge will say is, I order you to pay the victim back $150,000, and if you have assets now, we will seize them. If you don't have assets now, when you get out of jail, we're going to garnish you your wages, and 30% of your wages will be going to this. A couple of advantages. First of all, this doesn't cost you anything. I mean, this is part of the criminal process that, as Wendy mentioned a minute ago, is paid for by the government. You can go after proceeds of crime, or what are called substitute assets. So somebody steals money from you and they buy a boat with it, you can go after the boat. They steal money from you and they give it to their spouse, and their spouse buys a boat, you can still go after the boat. And this is important, it survives bankruptcy. So somebody gets a restitution order for $150,000, they declare bankruptcy, all their other debts get wiped out, but they still owe you $150,000. And 401ks aren't protected from this. So it's a much superior vehicle to have than suing somebody and winning. And the good news is it's free. And we have a lot of victims who are getting money back, you know, sometimes pretty slowly. I mean, it might be that they're getting $600 a month from a thief, but it's better than the alternative. So those are the other ways to get your money back. The other question that people ask, and I saw somebody had asked a question about this using the question feature in Zoom. And if you have other questions, by the way, bring them on. We do have some time after to answer them. One question that we get asked a lot is, should I call the IRS? And the hypothesis, of course, is that when people steal your money, they tend not to report it on their tax return. So they've almost certainly committed tax evasion, and absolutely you can call the IRS and make that an issue. Here's the problem. If what you're after is revenge, it's a great idea. I mean, let's add to this person's troubles and let's throw tax evasion onto their other legal difficulties. The downside is this. If you're hoping to get money back from the thief, when you call the IRS, what you do is you invite somebody else to step in line in front of you. The IRS will get paid before you do. And so you're really, in some senses, introducing a competitor to yourself in repayment. So it makes sense in certain situations. Most of the time when people call me and want to do this, I talk them out of it. And I say, you know, you have to decide here between what's more important, getting revenge or getting your money back. And almost everybody says, no, I want my money back. Well, then don't call the IRS.
I'm sorry, I was answering a question. Okay, what to tell people? This is where we talk about how you control the narrative from the very beginning so that you can protect your personal and your business reputation. Number one, I know that a lot of dental professionals would rather run around the outside of the building in 100-degree heat 5 times before they deal with any type of conflict. Let me just tell you, you're not going to be able to do that in this particular case. You're going to have to address it with your staff members. And what you say during this time period is very crucial. Some people will have to go through the suspension process with a suspected thief, in which case you have to notify your staff members why that person is not there. So, for example, you're not going to be able to have a conversation at lunchtime with Jennifer telling her that you've found some anomalies and that you would like for her to take about 3 days off to answer those anomalies and to explain them, and then go back to work that afternoon with all of Jennifer's coworkers and not tell them why she's not there. Number one. Number two, when you separate or terminate the employment relationship with that suspect, you're also going to have to let your staff know. And I always recommend to my clients that you keep it very vague. You give them some hint that something is going on, but you otherwise keep it very vague, and you ask them not to discuss it with referral sources, with former employees, including the suspect, or with patients or vendors. It's a private matter that you keep within the office. And while we're on the subject, our mission is to take care of our patients and provide them with the very best care that we can. And this is a distraction for us. So I ask that you also not speak to each other about it, right? So you're putting it out there what your expectations are of your employees, because you may need their help. Some of them may have information and want to come to you and share that. Also, you want to go to the next one, Dave?
Sure. Sorry, I was just answering a question.
Okay.
I got distracted.
Okay. As far as your patients, it depends on how you feel. I've worked with clients who have said, you know what, I did nothing wrong, and if my patients find out, I don't really care because I didn't do anything wrong. I have other clients that say, no way, I don't want my patients to find out what's going on. Case in point, I have a client right now in Florida who's having some issues with some cash being stolen, and his patients are finding out about it, and they're angry. And they're saying, this isn't my balance. I don't know, I don't know what my balance is, but I know this isn't right. I paid cash, whatever. My suggestion is, again, sort out the accounting issues with your patients, but don't go into any type of detail. Because remember, we're also talking about the point where you're kind of in between having filed a police report, but the thief hasn't yet been criminally convicted. So it's a tenuous time where anything you say could be used against you, and someone could claim slander against you. So you really want to watch what you're saying. My recommendation to a patient, if they ask, where's Jennifer? A good answer would be, well, you'll need to ask Jennifer, but she no longer works here. Or just say, we don't discuss personnel matters. She's not here. Also, with your referral sources, I know that this is incredibly important for my orthodontic friends. Well, it's important for everybody, but I know specifically for my orthodontic friends and my oral surgery friends as well. I do recommend having a business owner to business owner meeting with your top referral sources and not exactly telling them what happened. Don't give them any details. You may simply say, I had an integrity issue with Jennifer and she is no longer with our office. I just want you to know, in case you hear something, please feel free to come to me and talk to me personally about it, and control the narrative on that so it doesn't hurt your business in the future. And as far as references for that particular employee is concerned, same thing we always say. We don't give out any information. I'll confirm dates of employment and one other question. That's it. Another easy way around it is to say, my attorney has advised me that I'm not to comment on the situation. If someone goes and hires that employee after you say that, then they might deserve what they're going to get when that employee steals from them as well, because that's just plain stupid. But that's a nice code for saying, this person, something's really bad, and no, my attorney told me not to talk about it.
Yeah, you should tell them what the other question is, Wendy, or what the question you would answer is.
Would you hire him back?
Yeah. That's the question.
Okay, yeah. Would you hire him back? Well, hell no. Yeah, add the hell in there. Or absolutely, or no way, or whatever. Emphatically no.
Yeah. And that leads into he or she is gone, so why should you investigate? One of the main reasons you want to investigate is 22% of embezzlements in our industry are not investigated. And that's kind of sad to really think about that, because they think, well, I ended the employee relationship and it's done and it's over and I'm going to move on. But just like Wendy said, if you allow that person to go back out into the dental industry and look for another job, the proof is no longer in the pudding, right? So you cannot have that proof for other doctors to know what this person is aware of, that they have that history. Also, for your future financial recovery for insurance purposes, before joining Prosperident, I have a personal experience that they uncovered some employee dishonesty and chose not to have it investigated. And in the end, it did end up costing them a lot of money. They were able to recover a small portion, but not near what they should have had they have it professionally investigated. So, you know, you want to prevent your other colleagues from having the same experience happening from them, and also protect what you've invested in. You've invested in a practice, and, you know, you want to protect that also. The other scary thing and sad thing is 46% of dentists who have had embezzlement occur will get hit again. And so that's where it's really important to have that infrastructure and know what you need to do to make sure that that investigation happens. So talking about that, let's talk about what we can do for dentists. Well, we all know that we conduct embezzlement investigations. So if you think that there's something going on suspicious in your office, or if you have a colleague that has something suspicious, we're definitely here to investigate that for you. Another thing, like I just talked about the 46% that have embezzlement happen again, is we offer a customized office protection system that we help you determine that you have systems in place to help protect you from having this happen again.
Sorry, I got answering another question.
Okay.
As always, we do these webinars to give rather than to take, and we have a few things to give you today. The big one, and you can see part of it on the screen, its proper name is the panic checklist, but it really should be the holy shit checklist. So this is designed to kind of guide you through the most immediate steps when you wake up in the middle of the night and you think, oh my gosh, somebody is stealing from me. So there's an email address there where you can request it, but in a few minutes, there's our end of webinar email that's going out. It should be in your inbox in about 12 minutes. And there's a box at the bottom of that. You can just click on it and download the checklist. So either way is fine. Either send us an email and ask for it, or click that link that you're going to get in a few minutes to get that panic checklist. And we just updated it this month, so it's very fresh. Also, there's all kinds of information on our website, and most of you have probably been on the website. There are a number of different parts to it. There's the Hall of Shame, where we profile about 700 people who have embezzled from dentists. We also have a lot of articles there, and as well, we've got some descriptions of the various things we do. I mean, Amber mentioned investigation and our other product, Office Protection System, which is really designed to help you make your practice as protective as it can be of your money. So that stuff is all there on our website. And I'll just renew our request that if you've been enjoying our webinars, we'd love you to leave a Google review for us. You can use the link that is there on the screen, or you can as well, there's a link on the end of session email that's coming out in a few minutes where you can click on that, and it will take you right to our review page. So at this point, we'd all like to thank you for being with us again. We're really excited about next month. Again, it's your open-ended chance to ask any question you want. We're happy to have your written questions. What we'd really love is if you took a minute, and it does not have to be fancy at all. I mean, take your phone and do a selfie video and ask the question, and we'll answer them live next month. Really about anything you want. The only topic that's out of bounds is my barber. But other than that, ask anything you want. And as Amber mentioned initially, we have some prizes if we use your question. If it is a written question, I'm happy to send you a free copy of my book, and I'll even sign it for you. The book is called Dental Embezzlement, The Art of Theft and the Science of Control. And if you send us a video question and we use it, then you still get the book and also a consultation with us. So it's a great chance to get some free advice, some feedback on what you're doing in your practice. So we'd love to see your questions. We need them by September the 8th, and you can email them to us, and we'll be looking forward to receiving those. If you have a question for any of us, the email addresses are all there. Also, we've got our website. It all has the same suffix, right? dentalembezzlement.com. Our phone number is there as well. And feel free to reach out to us for anything that we can do for you. With that, we did have a couple of questions that we didn't get to answer, so we'll take a look at those and see what we can deal with. And otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for being with us, and we look forward to having you back in a month. Let's just see.
Yeah.
One thing I will mention, one of the people attending who asked a few of the questions is one of our team members. Her name is Kelly Paxton. Kelly works with us. She also does some other private investigation stuff. Kelly's from Portland, Oregon. And she had to leave a few minutes ago, but I did want to give a shout out to Kelly and mention that she's probably the world's leading expert on a concept called pink collar crime, which really relates to embezzlement by female perpetrators. Kelly has been interviewed by everybody on this. I mean, this is her area of expertise. And she said something that was really funny, kind of. She said, when a financial crime turns deadly, it becomes a red collar crime, which I thought was an interesting answer. But yeah, Kelly is a Prosperident team member, and she's a terrific resource for us.
Okay, I have a question. This is from Paul. It's a very thoughtful question. He writes, after cashing so many checks made out to the dentist, how often do the banks suspect embezzlement or theft before the dentist does? How often do banks and financial institutions start investigations and inform the dentist victim?
Yeah, that's a great question. And hi, Paul. Paul's a friend of mine, and he's a big fan of our webinars, so great to see you there. I guess the best comment I can make about banks is this. They don't always hire staff members the same week NASA fires rocket scientists. A lot of stuff that banks probably should catch in terms of what happens with checks. A lot of what they should catch, they just don't. And if you want to try a little experiment, take a check, make it out to your spouse, but don't put their name on it. Use your favorite Disney character. So if you're female, make it out to Donald Duck and sign it Minnie Mouse. And make it for some decent amount, like $500, and say to your spouse, okay, but I don't want you to go to a bank teller. I want you to deposit it at an ATM. And the chances that anybody's going to call you from the bank and say, you might want to stay away from Orlando or Anaheim for a little while, the chance that anybody's going to say that's really small. Banks are really automated at this point, and a lot of stuff happens there that shouldn't. Okay, so to answer Paul's question, the detection rate of this stuff from banks is really low.
Yep. I have a question, Dave. If a practice has identified the act, what should be their next step? When do we get involved once it's identified? What do you have a background and story to share on that?
Okay, yeah. Great question, and the answer is as quickly as you possibly can. This starts to get complicated and technical very quickly, and there are a lot of considerations here. We want to make sure that evidence is preserved. We want to we want to ensure that we find this stuff as quickly as we can and get you as much money back as you can and get the person in jail. You know, there are a lot of facets to this, and you know, Amber and Wendy and I all spend a whole lot of time helping people navigate through this really complicated problem. So if you have suspicions, or if you've caught somebody red-handed already, we'd really like to be the first phone call that you make. And most of the time, I'm kind of the person that people go to first. And you know, one of my responsibilities here normally is kind of the intake process and to understand what's happened and, you know, help you make those first few critical steps correctly. So yeah, you know, that don't wait, and things aren't going to solve themselves generally. So as soon as you can. Maureen says hi, David. Hi, Maureen. How are you? Maureen's a good friend of ours, and we're always glad to have her here.
Okay, I have a question. Valerie was asking, she said a colleague was told that she could 1099 the thief for the amount of money the thief stole.
Yeah.
Can you address that? Because I've heard that before too.
Yeah, you sure can. So if in case anybody doesn't know, what a 1099 is really a record of employment earnings. So that's the thing that makes it taxable in the eyes of the IRS. It is great to send one out, but bear in mind what I said before. When you get the IRS involved, they step in front of you in line in terms of repayment. Okay, so thieves generally aren't sitting on big bags of cash. You know, they tend to have a very limited ability to repay, and if they are in prison and then they get out, and now what's happening is they're paying back from a garnishee. Do you really want the IRS to get all their money back first, and then after that, which might be 6 years, you start getting repayment? So you can do it. I'm just not sure in a lot of cases that it's the best thing that you can do.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to be conscious of the fact that it's going to postpone your repayment. Now, if you're not interested in repayment and you just want to punish somebody, great. If you have some other way of getting all your money back, you know, if, for example, if the theft is $25,000 or less and your insurance covers it, you're going to get it all back from insurance. Then by all means, turn the dogs at the IRS loose. But if it's a sizable theft and some of your repayment is coming from what the thief can do for you, I'm just not sure it's your best plan. Now, the other thing I'll mention is that it's not unheard of for the IRS to monitor court proceedings and, you know, see that an embezzlement case is coming up and realize that they have somebody who's a tax evader. So they may find it on their own anyway. But in general, I would be really cautious about introducing the IRS into the equation.
Okay.
Okay, Dan.
Oh, go ahead, Amber. I'm sorry. Oh, someone asked, why do dentists who have been embezzled from get hit again? Yeah,
short answer, because they tend to learn the wrong lessons.
Yeah. They tend to learn the wrong lessons, but a lot of it is they're fearful to get systems really integrated, a good infrastructure. And that's one of the things that I see happen is there's just lack of infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, dentists who get stolen from tend to have systemic weaknesses, and then, as I say, they learn the wrong lessons, so they fix the wrong things. And let me give you an example of this. Well, let's say that you're allowing a staff member to take the deposit to the bank. And, you know, somewhere today, probably there was some staff member who left the practice with $4,200 and deposited $3,700 into the bank. So if you're that person, what goes through your mind is, well, if only I had taken the deposit to the bank myself, that wouldn't have happened. And I'm not sure I agree with that. To me, what was really missing there was verification. And we did a session a while ago, and I think it was one of our most informative ones, and it was called Reckless or Reconcile, Your Choice. And really the point we were talking about there is it doesn't matter who takes the cash to the bank. What's important is that you have a way of verifying that the right amount of cash, or the right amount of deposit, sorry, it's not cash, the right amount of deposit arrived at the bank. If you're doing that, it doesn't matter who takes the money to the bank. But, you know, a lot of times people will solve the wrong problem after this, and they will shut down whatever narrow little methodology the thief took. And thieves have a lot of choices. I mean, we've seen hundreds of different methodologies. In fact, Wendy and I were talking on the phone last week about a new one that she found. So they have lots of choices, and you know, we cannot view this as an exercise of, you know, whatever specific methodology a thief used against me, I'm going to make sure that never happens again. I mean, you have to do that, but it can't stop there. And it goes back to what Amber said about, you know, you need integration in your systems, and you need stuff that's well thought out.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see. I'm just gonna look through. Somebody's question, and this was kind of a follow-up question to the one about the 1099s. So what somebody said in response to that question was, but I get to tax deduct the amount on the 1099, and that's true. So we're talking here about an employee who steals, and you issue them a 1099. You weren't taxed on that money in the first place. Most of you use what's called the cash method of accounting. So if a thief is stealing, and let's assume that it's a skimming kind of thing where they're taking incoming insurance checks, you haven't paid tax on those anyway. So issuing a 1099 for that money doesn't then entitle you to deduct what wasn't taxable to you in the first place. Okay. The only place where the 1099 would help would be if you're using the other method of accounting, which is called the accrual method. And that's normally really big practices. Like, you don't do that unless your practice has $5 million or more coming in. Somebody asked us about cost. What does it cost for our prevention program? That's the one that Amber mentioned, called Office Protection System. In a solo practice, it's $7,000. In a group practice, it can cost a little bit more. The other thing I'll mention is that we, right now with COVID, are offering people payment terms so that they can pay us for things over time, because we understand that for a lot of you, COVID has really messed up your cash flow. So we're quite happy to work with you and make it affordable. And certainly if somebody wants to learn more about Office Protection System, I'd encourage them to call me, and my number's there on the screen. Anything else we want to cover, ladies?
No, I think we've got all the questions answered, and getting ready for our question answer special edition next month, September 16th.
Yeah, I can't wait. That's going to be really cool, because we'll get some fascinating questions, and you know, we get some great questions in these sessions, and I can only think that if we said to you guys, you know, you don't have to think of them in real time. You can just you know, you can take all the time you want to come up with the questions. That we'll get some terrific ones. So we've laid down the gauntlet, folks. It's your turn. Try and stump us. All right. Well, love to thank my wonderful co-hosts. I gotta say, we have a lot of fun putting these together and delivering them. And you know, these gals are just an absolute dream to work with in this stuff. So I will thank Wendy and Amber for being with us today, and I'll thank all of you. and we will see you in just over a month.
Everyone
Bye.
have a good evening. Bye.
This concludes this episode of the Prosperident webinar series. The team will be back soon with more tools and ideas. If you have questions about this webinar, if you would like to discuss your practice with one of us, or if there is a topic you would like to see in a future webinar, we would love to hear from you. You can contact Prosperident through its website, www.prosperident.com, or by calling 888-398-2327.